So basically, this is going to be a very simple, casual, hardly edited tutorial on how to draw a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic based horse. I have a lot of people that are stuck inside, there's a quarantine going on, and they've reached out saying, they want to pick up a new hobby. So I want to help provide a sort of frame of reference, kind of my process, how I get used to drawing these little pastel horses, and just to provide something that maybe people can use to branch off of, to get comfortable with. When I started out, I had nothing. I didn't have artist friends to network with. I didn't know how to scan my traditional pieces to make them look pretty. I didn't know the canvas size. So this isn't going to be a very technical video, but it's going to kind of be maybe a starter. So yeah, let's draw. If this video gets 50,000 likes, I will shave my head. Let's begin. Alright, so let's get started. I actually use Fire Alpaca for my digital program. It's basically like Paint Tool Sci, but when I started my art, I was on an iMac, and Paint Tool Sci wasn't compatible with my drawing tablet. So I found this program. It's free. It's basically the alternative. At the time it was very basic, but since then it's been building up and it's very solid. I actually prefer it to even Clip Studio Paint nowadays, just because I'm used to this layout. It's sort of the opposite of things like Photoshop, but if you're used to Paint Tool Sci, it's practically the same. Also, the correction right now says 31, but normally I use about 15 right here. It's basically a stabilizer is what that is. I have very shaky hands, so I like using a stabilizer to kind of, keep things smooth. Of course, you can adjust that to your liking. Some people swear by it, and some people swear against it. So for my canvas, I'm going to start out with just 4,000 by 4,000 pixels. I usually go up to 7,000 for really big photos, but normally for really any casual picture, it'll just be about 2,000 to 4,000. So what I'm doing first, I have a transparent background, which I quite like for the end product, but when I'm sketching, I like to use a purple or blue background, something that's not very saturated, but it helps the eye strain indubitably. So much. Especially when you're on the computer for a long period of time. Even with taking, those 20-minute breaks to readjust your eyes, which y'all better be doing, even with that, when you're really into a project that can take you an hour or more, any little thing that you can do to ease that eye strain helps wonders. So, let's start the horses, shall we? What I always do first is the head. That helps me kind of figure out the pivot point for everything else, the rest of the body. I usually don't know what pose I'm quite going for until I start the head. So I just draw a casual circle right now, and it looks like, it's facing up and to the left. So maybe I'll draw this cross here. I always draw these crosses just to kind of help me map out where the face is going to be positioned. This horizontal line right here is usually about where the nose is. So when you draw the head, the shape can be as simple or as complex as you want. The fun part about drawing My Little Pony based characters is that the actual show has them very simplified. So every little detail is made a lot simpler for the animators, because they have to use these different puppets over and over again. And if they had 100 different strands of hair to animate, well, they wouldn't be able to get out a show every weekend. So that leaves us a lot of room to experiment. We could, for example, stick with this round face, or maybe you want to add a little pudge. You know, that's endearing. Let's give them a little cheek right here. We kind of narrow it down where the neck base is going to be. If you look at humans from 3/4 angle, you'll notice that the area around their eye is just a little sunken in. So you can do that too. The brow sticks out, so depending on how detailed or realistic or, you know, just the scale or position of the head, you can really add a lot to just make it your own. Now the head and all of the facial features are very fun because there are thousands of ways you can do this. So many possibilities. If you want to go for a more cartoony style, you can use a different sort of bold techniques or references. I would highly recommend looking at different concept art pieces. Maybe take something that you really enjoy, a video game or a TV show. So let's say Steven Universe. Okay, so for the mouths, they have a much rougher mouth. They always show kind of the teeth, which can look awkward for a lot of styles, but it's very bold. It's very brash. Things like Adventure Time, SpongeBob, Steven Universe use these kind of styles a lot. So something like this you could use with bolder style. But okay, let's remove the teeth. Let's go a little cuter. Well, if this character's mouth is closed, if we're still doing, you know, a toothy grin like this, well, this is where their teeth would be, right? That looks okay, but here's a trick. The audience already knows that these are teeth, right? So you don't need to fill in the entire thing. You don't need to essentially hold their hands and show them every aspect of detail. So let's say you make it a little stylized. Just add the edges. Suddenly, it looks a lot cuter, more stylized, and the audience still knows that's teeth. Let's say for an open mouth, maybe you want to add something very simple. So there's the tongue, there's the tooth. You could add the jagged, bold teeth. It looks kind of awkward, but you can definitely use that for the style. Make it look endearing in that, you know, that little boy with the buck teeth kind of way, or like Caillou-esque. You can kind of give a round tooth even. You can make that, it looks much younger, very endearing like that. If you remove this tongue and you want to go a little more detailed, you can add kind of a little dip right there. You can make it simple. You can add a little more, like a swirl is sometimes what I'll do. Again, just 1,000 ways to do this. If you're wanting to just maybe go with a very simple little smile. Okay, well, here's a smile, right? Well, if you make it smaller, that's just, you know, kawaii, that's almost anime or chibi-like. You can make a little cat face. Going back to the smile, if you want to add a little dimension to this, what about wrinkles? Well, there's a smile wrinkle. This looks almost like a grimace, doesn't it? You can attach it. If you do an inward little wrinkle like this, it's a bigger smile, whereas if you do an outward one, it kind of implies that the cheek is puffed up. So maybe it's kind of a cheeky grin, or maybe this character has something in their mouth. Maybe they're trying to be cool and imposing. You can add a wrinkle to the kind of lip area. For the nose, you can add simple lines for the nostrils. You can add circles or shapes. You don't have to have nostrils at all. You can have a little wrinkle above the nose if they're making a scrunchy face. For the eyes, oh gosh, there are, again, thousands of possibilities. Now, the show style has them taking up the vast majority of the head. It's very uncanny, and it's totally fine. If you want to go for it, go for it. Here's one trick though. When you are sketching it, when you are sketching anything with a big eye and a big pupil, it might be a little hard to tell if this looks right at first glimpse. In fact, it might look strange and weird. And that is because this pupil right here is not colored in. So when you draw it, when you sketch it like this, you can't 100% tell without looking very closely where these eyes are going. So sometimes, if you're not careful and you finish the sketch and you start drawing everything in, you realize, oh snap, this eye might be looking over here, this eye might be looking to this direction, and you just didn't notice it. So the trick to avoid that is to just, even with a sloppy, your pencil tool, just color in the pupils like so. You can even go in and just to make sure that you can visualize it properly, add the highlights. Sometimes what I will do is I will actually sketch the head, and then before I move on, or before I start lining anything else, I will completely finish the eyeballs. This helps me get a very good idea of the tone of the piece, or how the eyes are going to look, where they're facing, and it just sometimes helps me pose the rest of the body better. But again, totally up to you. So let's say you don't want to go for show style. You want to do something a little unique or weird. Well, again, references are your friend. There are so many things that you could do. You could go for an anime look. You could go for a cartoon look. There's Animal Crossing, where you could kind of add that tired, baggy eye that doesn't have too much detail, but it implies quite a lot. Like that. You could add something simple. One of the easiest anime eyes is actually, so you add the top like this, you add the bottom. It's one of those awkward anime eyes that actually kind of fills out the whole white of the eyelid. Big pupil, which again, you want to color in. And then here's a trick. If you draw kind of a half circle on the top and then you color all of this in, so black or a very dark color that matches the pupil. Well, first off you look at it and oh snap, it looks kind of weird, right? Well, take the white or the highlight color you plan to use and add one big eye highlight towards the top. It could be on this side, it could be over here, and then maybe one or two little ones. And there you go. That's one of the easier anime eyes that you could use. So the fun part is, again, there's just no rule to how you can do this. You can use little things, little nuances that you like. You can add an eyelash to the front of the eye like this. You can add those, the typical show style has maybe 1 to 3 little eyelashes here. It's very simple. You can make it very thick. You can make it pointy. You can add bottom lashes. You can add just bottom lashes. Make it very simple. You could incorporate different things that you like. So, for example, I've drawn human eyes a lot before I have learned to draw realistic people. So one thing that people have is kind of a little duct right here. You could incorporate that. Sometimes I'll do that just for style. It doesn't have to be a super realistic duct, but you can just add a little, you know, implication right there. There we go. Show style doesn't really use eyebrows, but I love using eyebrows to relay a lot more emotion. You can really add a lot of different movement with them, and I'm very partial to different wrinkles, if you haven't noticed. I love adding wrinkles to the nose, to maybe around the eyebrow, like so. Because, I mean, this is a mad face, but what if you super exaggerated those wrinkles, huh? Now she's really mad. If you add a little wrinkle under her mouth, that gives a lot of accentuation. Maybe even to her eye, you make this eye kind of folded right here. And now she's really mad. So what if she's a unicorn? Well, horns are fairly easy, especially in show style. It's basically just a cone. Ice cream cone. Now, if you see this 3D shape right here, this right here would be the back. You can kind of just draw it on and, you know, noodle with it until it looks right. And, okay, maybe, well, she's looking up, so maybe the texture would follow it up like this. Maybe this is the spiral of the horn. Well, how do you want to draw a spiral? Well, you could do it very simply like that. You could add a second line here just for fun if you're doing kind of cartoony style. You could do, heck, you don't have to follow physics. You could do a straight line. If you want to make it more detailed, maybe she's a princess or she's very regal. Maybe you just really love that medieval painting style of those old unicorns. Well, you can add a long horn like this. To make it even more regal, you can sharpen that tip to a point. You add the little spirals. Okay, so that's cute, but then zoom in a bit. These are spirals, right? They're not meant to be flat. So what if you add a little bit here and there of an indent? Doesn't have to be crazy. Just an implication of one. So here's another big example of texture. So this is implying the texture of the horn. And you don't have to show all of it. You don't have to be hand-holding the viewer. So in this case, I'm talking about the spirals. Do you have to draw every little nuance? No. You could erase parts of it. And without hesitation, the viewer could say, yeah, that's still a horn. But now it's a little cleaner. It's a little less distracting. Ears are very varied. In the show style, they are again very simple. You just draw kind of a pointy little shape and a line in the middle. But you can make that as detailed as you would like. So let's say you wanted to make it a little floofier. Well, you can thicken it out a little bit, add kind of another dimension. You can make the inside of the ear floofy. You can add little ear tufts on either side or on just one side. Heck, you can make them have a small head in comparison to gigantic ears. I've seen that as a style. It's completely up to you. And that's the fun part, is just experimenting. And you know what? If something doesn't come out quite like you liked it, that's something to learn for next time. And it doesn't really matter, it's your piece. And it makes for some good stories later on. In 5 years, when everybody digs up your old cringy stuff, And you'll say, oh my gosh, wow, look at how much I've improved since then. It's crazy. So one trick for eyes that some people don't quite realize, especially at the start, is when you are trying to draw a head-on, facing the camera face. So let's say we've drawn this eye. Okay, eyelash, very simple, you know, just maybe this is a reference picture, smiling, it's very simple. And what I used to do was I would grab this eye, copy and paste it, flip it around, and suddenly I have a mirror image. Now it might seem, it's okay, but one thing that you might slightly realize, and you definitely will realize later, is that it starts looking a little weird. And the reason is because it's so symmetrical. Humans are not used to pure symmetry when it comes to faces. In fact, it's quite creepy. It's really interesting when you look in, you know, at a photograph of yourself, for example, and you see that mirror image of yourself, and it kind of throws you off because it looks slightly different. Because you're not used to seeing yourself from that angle. It shows how asymmetrical you are. There was actually a story about the Starbucks mermaid. That original logo, her face was very symmetrical, and it was actually creeping people out so much that they had to change it. So the trick is, if you're just doing something, you know, you're doing a front-facing reference photo, no big deal. So what if you just did one little extra step? You took this mirror image, make it partially transparent, and on a different layer, you sketch in kind of a trace. You're not super crazy trying to, you know, match every pixel, of course. But you just, you know, just a simple trace. It's not going to be perfect, you see that? You can adjust it to your liking, but then you remove the bottom layer, and voila! Slightly different, but different enough that it makes sense. It works in your mind's eye. It looks more organic. With things like ears being mirrored, that doesn't matter too much. Of course, if you want to look very, very organic and raw, then definitely I would recommend not doing mirror image, avoiding that as much as possible. But especially with the eyes, you don't want to just grab and flip the exact same thing. It will be noticeable. So let's move on to the body, shall we? We have our head. So there are several different ways we can do this. Well, it also depends on if you are making a masculine or feminine body. In all aspects, usually the masculine body is a little thicker. So while we're still on the head for a feminine body could be a little slimmer. So you see this snout is very cute and slim, petite. There's almost kind of a heart shape going on here, little. Whereas for a male's or masculine body, we could have a wider snout, maybe boxier, definitely a boxier jaw. And of course this can vary from style to style, but generally it's a little bigger. It doesn't have to be crazy, of course. And there are definitely so many different types of bodies. Even in the show, you got Big Mac versus, you know, Snips and Snails, their tiny little lanky bodies. So feminine bodies tend to have a smaller neck, whereas males have a larger one, thicker. But here's a big difference, and here's one of the most important lessons ever. This will stick with you until you are 80 years old. This is the bean. So, you've got the head, yeah? You've got the neck. Okay, great. So let's say this is a female. Cool. She is ready for her big debut. Well, she needs a torso and a butt. Those are the important parts of this body. So what you want to do is make a jelly bean. What I mean by that is two circles that are connected together. So for females or feminine bodies, what usually happens is their torso, right here, their chest, is a little smaller than their backside. It's not too crazy a difference, but what you want to do, okay, one circle, and let's just do, straight side to side pose. Well, this circle is slightly larger. You can definitely use, a circle tool if that's easier. Completely up to you. So two circles, and then we connect them. So what we do is we take the edge, we can add a little slope to it. You can either do this, or you can make it a little slimmer. I like adding a little belly. And suddenly it has become a bean. Now masculine bodies are in the same direction, let's see. So a little box here. Bit of a thicker neck, okay. And here's the biggest difference in their bodies is the male or masculine characters most usually have a much larger torso, much bigger chest than they do booty. So whereas the female bean is, the contrast isn't as large. Here you can usually see, like with Big Mac, for example. You've got a big circle here, small circle here, you connect them. And it's usually much more noticeable. And of course this can vary widely. There are plenty of characters that just have, very ambiguous body shapes. But generally when you're drawing a very feminine versus a very masculine type of body, this is kind of the direction you want to go. When you're drawing this head on too, the bean always applies. There's always a bean. There must always be a bean at Winterfell. So we've got the neck, we've got the torso, and don't ever forget the torso. Sometimes when you're in a hurry or you're just speed doodling, you'll quickly draw out a body like this and oh snap, this kind of looks weird. I mean, it's missing its whole chest. You've drawn the neck and just kind of combined it into the body. But what you don't realize is the bean would kind of be here, the back would be here. And if you combine those, do you see this little spot right here on the other side of the neck? Well, that adds a whole different dimension. That's the same effect as if you look at your own neck and you see, let's see, there's the SCM muscle, this V-shaped muscle right here. You see how it's just not, there's kind of this implication of, let's say, collarbone here. And the shoulders kind of combined in an awkward manner right here by the neck. Well, to an extent, you can see that happening with horse necks as well, and how they connect. So you can see that the shoulders would be on either side here. So back to a front view. Again, it's bean. If you're doing a straight-on front view, then you can't really see the back. Maybe sometimes I don't like to draw completely straight on front view because it looks weird. You want to take some artistic freedom, So I'll usually make it not quite 100% straight on. But there's the back bean, here's the front bean, and guess what? So when you're combining them, this one of course is the one in front, yeah? So let's start erasing the back a little bit. Well, how would they combine? So when you are meshing them together, you add this overlap. Now this overlap right here, and sometimes you might have to play with it a little bit till it kind of feels right, till you get that, you start noticing when it looks right. That is basically dividing the stomach and the leg. So this is going to be where the leg starts coming out. You're going to erase this and suddenly it's a leg. This overlap is super important and it adds so much to a character. I will come back to that because that is always fun to play with too. Even when you're sketching, you'll notice little things such as, you know, these overlaps in the sketch lines. Well, that could be an overlap of kind of where the shoulders end and the stomach begins. But let's move on to the leggies. So with legs, again, feminine bodies are usually a lot more petite. All of their shoulders, they start around here. You can kind of map it out. See what works. It's kind of, it's almost almost like a gorilla in how their posture is with their shoulders. It's not like a human where, you know, a human, if they were facing that same way, their neck would be, be kind of this one awkward posture, wouldn't it? Because their shoulders would be back here. Whereas with a horse, it's very much in front. So that's something that takes a little while to get used to. Feminine legs can be a lot more petite. Because the show style, it's very simple and easy to draw these. Sometimes I'll add that little blip right here, just to add some, you know, texture. You can add little fetlocks, of course. You can add just a straight line for a stylized fetlock. You can add anything. Now, if you will notice, this kind of coordinates with the bean. So we once again go back to the bean, especially for these back legs. So what you want to do is you take this part of the circle, and that is where you start building the back of this leggy. Same here. Now, I don't have any wonderful, perfect answer for this awkward little bend. This took me quite a while just to get used to, and after that it's just muscle memory. It becomes a lot easier. But I find a lot of people have a hard time kind of figuring out that nice slope. Same with the male figure over here. Shoulders would be about this area. It's kind of connected to the bean here. Their legs are generally thicker. And their back legs also correspond to the bean. You may notice that, of course, this bean is going to be a little smaller, so this back half right here is going to start out a little smaller than maybe even the females. However, it usually branches out and becomes thicker again. Big tree trunk. Like so. So this can actually be implemented no matter what the pose is. There is always a bean. And if you see right here, you see this leg kind of becomes an overlap. So it kind of divides this stomach from the leg, the back half. And here is another kind of, it's even part of the rough sketch. I haven't really finalized it, but hey, it kind of makes sense, right? This is sort of the shoulder and it divides the body from the arm. So I can keep that there as an overlap. Now, one thing that drives everyone crazy is the age-old question, how do I draw the back leg? The front leg is usually a lot easier. It's this one in the back that drives people nuts, no matter what skill level you're at. The thing is, people try and guess where exactly it could be. They want to place it and they just want to play with it until it seems right. They'll come back and forth to it going, oh no, this doesn't make sense at all. But here's the trick. You don't have to guess. So imagine the torso as almost a wheel. When you're looking at it straight on, for example, let's kind of get a stranger, a little more unique dynamic pose. So bean, back of the bean. Here's kind of the stomach, and it overlaps. You see that? All right, so when you are drawing and figuring out the position of the legs, think of it like this. Here's kind of a wheel structure. You see that 3D, that shape, that wheel? That's actually the shoulder. And so the other one would be here. It would be kind of connected like that. So now you know where the other shoulder is. You can kind of base the other front leg off of that. And guess what? The back is exactly the same. Wheel structure connected to wheel structure. And suddenly you see the back leg. You don't even have to guess where it is. Now you know. So you can completely play with it like this. And it all makes sense. You can move it to the back. So something that may have cost you a lot of stress and a lot of back and forth is suddenly 20 seconds of mapping out where it is. So while a side view is a little harder to demonstrate, it's completely the same. There's the wheel it's attached to. Maybe the wheel's a little lopsided, maybe it's over here a little bit. So it would practically be at the same level. You can even move it just a little bit out. Take your artistic freedom and, you know, make it so that it's not mirrored with this one. It doesn't look really robotic. Just add a little more space in there. Completely up to you. So now, what if you're a Pegasus? Well, Pegasi are not necessarily real animals, so there aren't really rules on how you have to do that, which is, again, very fun and open to your creative interpretation. So, let's say that you really enjoy, birds of different species, maybe the weird ones, maybe you like owls, so you can go and Google image owl wings, owls in flight. You can look up eagles, you can look up kestrels, seagulls. There are hundreds of different types of birds, and they have such unique wings. You're not limited by one. But where do you put it, you may ask? Well, you can decide that as well. The show actually has it right in about the mid-back, which is a little awkward. I enjoy putting it right behind and between the shoulder blades. So it would be about here, and the second one would be about the same place, right there. Now the show has very simple wings. You just draw the outline, and then you draw a little line on the inside, and that's it. As for the back wing, well, you already know where it is. I would kind of be looking at this wing as a reference if I'm trying to get them in a similar pose. So I'm not mirroring it, but I am referencing it. So it looks similar, but you can see and tell it's clearly not the exact replica. But I want to be a little more adventurous, so let's see. Maybe we look up specific types of wings. There's a shape that I've grown very familiar with, which is when you're drawing a wing, I will draw the shorter part here and the longer part up here. But of course, that can be different for different types of birds. So sometimes if I am making a specific type of horse, a different kind of OC, maybe I want it to be based off of an eagle or a different, a tropical bird. It's completely up to you. It's really fun to experiment. You can take something and maybe you just make your own type of wing. So with cartoon characters like this one, I have a cartoon style, so I think it would be a little weird if I went in and drew every little aspect of detail for every wing and every feather. Remember, that's a lot of texture. You're basically hand-holding your audience, showing them where every detail is. They don't need to know. They already know it. They don't need to be reminded. So you could just kind of stylize it. Make it a little cartoony. Sometimes I'll just go in, I'll draw wings without thinking too much about it. I'll say, well, this looks right or this looks wrong. Let me undo. Thank goodness for the undo button. Sorry, traditional artists. Can add kind of some feathers on the inside, very casually. Maybe this doesn't quite add up, so I'll erase it a little bit here. Play around with it. There's so much you can do. So much to see. So what's wrong with taking the back streets? Add in the back wing. Just very casual. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. Again, the same method for this back leg. Well, it's a wheel, so maybe it's here. Maybe it's ooh, maybe it's the opposite direction. Could be facing towards the back, like so. It's a little hoof. And like that, you've got wings. So, you're practically finished. What now? Well, what about the little details, like the hair, for example? Now, as you may have noticed from the show actually follows realism when it comes to pony hair. And the fact that if you look at characters like Fluttershy, let's see. So her hairline, it's actually very straight. It goes right down the middle like this. Very sharp V. And if you look at her from the back, pretend this is her back, her eyes would be over there. This is her neck. We do the bean. Here's her booty. So her hairline actually follows the sphere of her head, goes right down to the nape of her neck. And this is a real pony's hairline. So you might see that they draw it similar to this. And it can look really cute, but at the same time, sometimes it might look really awkward. It might look like an 80-year-old who's balding and has this really bizarre hairline. So it's completely up to you. If you want to take this hairstyle, you can definitely stylize it. Instead of keeping it, rigid and flat like this, you can add a little texture to it. After all, it's hair. Hair is wild, wavy. Like so. Or, if you look at different fan art, you might notice that a lot of us completely ignore that rule. We choose not to go that direction, and we actually give our ponies normal hairstyles. Stuff like, what about this? This is a widow's peak, or some people will do very, very realistic close cropped hairdos that show off the hairline. Sometimes people will just completely block off the hairline, so you can't really tell. It is completely up to you. Now something like this it's pretty stylized, so it doesn't 100% show the texture of the hair. It doesn't show this. For example, this is a curl. So if I was going realistic, I would do something more along the lines of this. A more realistic looking curl. Stuff like this you can easily find on, Google Images. Look for models with certain hairstyles. You can use yourself as a reference, of course. You can go all out with the detail like this. You can add little strands, or you could just simplify it. It is 100% up to you, and you know what? It can change from day to day. Maybe one day you feel like going a little simpler. Maybe one day you want to go all out, you want to experiment. Sometimes you can do a mix. Right here, I'm adding kind of a cartoonish back to the hair while keeping the front, that bang, really realistic and textured. It is all completely up to you. And that's the fun part. There's so much that you can do to experiment. It's fun to just look at other artists. They don't even have to be artists in the fandom. You can just look at, go to a museum or look at old medieval paintings of unicorns and knights and princesses. You can look at celebrities that you like and their hairstyles. You can use yourself as a reference. You can pose. You can kind of make an expression and take a picture and kind of mimic or cartoonify your eyes. There's so much out there, and there are really no static rules. It's a lot of fun to see what other artists can create. Another great thing about the fandom is just how together and close-knit people can be. So in the art community itself, we're very positive. We love building each other up. We love seeing what everyone has to offer. Creativity is encouraged. So go out there and, just create goofy things, create wonderful things. I hope this tutorial helps. Thanks.